Seneca Nero, what was the most lost you were on a ship, and where you didn't know the way out, or where you were? Well, thankfully, museum ships, at least in my case, are very, very well marked as to how to get out of there. Um, they are sometimes less well marked when you want to go to some weird nook and cranny that is on the official tour route, but the tour route loops back on itself, so you go the wrong way.
I'm just going to
I'm
interrupt
looking
the
at you this
question a
time.
bit because I'm just going to say this. Are we working? Hello, everyone.
Let's see here.
Um,
You're
I
showing
think
us live on YouTube.
I'm
I'm
live
seeing a
on
thumbs
YouTube.
up.
That's good. So, basically at the moment I managed to get everything working with OBS, just OBS, no restream, nothing. And I'm gonna try that for today, and then I'm gonna figure out what was the problem with it. What is the problem with it later? But basically, what I could suggest I've done is I have completely deconnected everything from the BT internet. So there could be an issue there. It could be that the Wi-Fi was swamping that the Wi-Fi which was supposed to be. This is what sometimes happens to the BT system. The BT system tries to prioritize the Wi-Fi over everything, and if anyone is using the Wi-Fi, which my mum and sister currently are to use the television, because the hardline connection to television isn't working, it then throttles everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing was, it's not supposed to do that, especially not when you have dual network connection. What it's supposed to do is just put one onto one connection and then just run Wi-Fi. But no, it was trying to run their thing through both connections, and it overloaded it all.
Hello and welcome to the channel. I hope you're going to enjoy your time here, and I hope you're going to have a
I
lot
think
of fun.
someone's just signed up
Please
to the
keep
Twitch
following, and
stream.
please
Hello.
invite others to subscribe.
Apologies to the Twitch
We
stream
have
for not
lots
for
of
those people on Twitch for us not
Thank you.
managing to continue with them.
Take care.
I do apologise. So, with that being said, we have some questions.
I think they largely migrated to my channel, so
Oh, good.
I'll take it.
They can hear you, hopefully.
And apparently, I got somebody who followed me. I don't know who that was, but thank you.
Yay, that's good. It's good to follow. It's good to follow in on. So, the question we have: what was the most lost you were on a ship where you didn't know the way out or where you were? I was about 6, 7, and I was crawling through the under construction HMS Montrose. I think that's how I was doing that, and I was between two pieces of metal, and I had a vague idea that I probably shouldn't go straight ahead because I could see the effect of welding torches. And I thought I was probably in the wrong space because, you see, I'd been touring around the ship which my dad was building at the time because my dad was a naval architect on it, and he asked me to have a look at something, and so I toddled in to have a look at something. And I probably should have had a line attached so I didn't get lost looking for something, but I didn't hang around because I was that age, and I did manage to find my way out, but it's mostly by a process of going towards the light, as in the welding torch sparks, was probably not a good idea.
So this was
very quickly. We did miss Colin Cameron's question as well.
Okay, Colin Cameron. If the Royal Navy went mass build in 37 with 23,000 ton carrier design study, how many could they have built before the war? Before the end of the war, presuming Churchill gets a different starting post. Well, let's put it this way: theoretically, you could order 4 every 18. You need about 12 months. So 4. Basically, you could order 4 a year, and they would take about 2 years to deliver, and still be able to keep the rest of the building program going. Because of the carriers and the armor they require, etc. They don't really use that much, and because if you're going with the because you said 1937 study, if I'm not mistaken, so if you're going with that study and you're going with the 23,000 ton model, the 23,000 ton was the illustrious class. So if you're going with the illustrious class, you could be getting 4. If you manage to order the 4 in 37, start 4 in 37. 4 in 38 and 4 in 39, and you just keep doing it, you could probably have gone through the whole war and have About 36. So not quite the Essex Swarm, but not bad. But honestly, you want to start in 1934 with the 33 study, Ark Royalish, and you want to go with the 23,000 ton version of Ark Royal, because Ark Royal was the 22,000 ton version of Ark Offlet. This is what people often forget. Ark Royal actually displaces less weight than the Illustrious class.
So,
I
wasn't there
presume that means that the Illustriouses have more armor then?
Yeah.
More armor, more subdivision. They are the more survivable option. But it's kind of like if you look at HMS Tiger, people usually go, "Well, yeah, she weighs a bit more than the Renown and Repulse, but she's still a battle cruiser like them," and they don't get the point. I go, look at it, and you'll find that she's shorter by about 28 meters, I think, from memory. But someone please go and check how much shorter Renown is than the Tiger is than Renown, and weighs more, and is slightly narrower in beam. So she's a more condensed ship. She carries more guns, and she displaces that much more. And you start to realize, well, hang on, that's the difference between basically a battle cruiser, one word, and a battle cruiser, two word. That's the difference, right there. Because in combat power, probably Tiger and the Renowns are about the same. Well, especially when they're launched. They're about the same in terms of raw combat power.
Just because Jackie Fisher was a fan of the TIE Fighter concept and doctrine, going back to a previous discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, then wasn't there a... Did they not have a 27,000 ton option or similar for Ark Royal?
Yeah.
That would have had a similar, that would have been very nifty, I'd guess.
Yes. Again, OBS is dropping frames like anything at this point. I should warn you all.
Can you drop the video and just keep the audio?
I don't know why OBS is dropping frames. I don't know why OBS is going down. It's going down like that. It's just, I don't know what's happening with OBS, and I don't know what's happening. The internet seems to be fine. The internet connection, I'm watching the internet connection. I literally have it open in front of me. So I'm watching the internet connection, and the internet connection now I've gone entirely onto is doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
I literally have.
Do you think you could be getting micro disconnects?
Don't think so.
Because I had that issue at my last place.
The satellite seems to be fine. The sat link. It was the land link was getting micro disconnects, but now I'm split off from them too. I just, you know, it's what's happening. I'll have fun trying to rejig it, refigure, and heat problems and all of it again in a bit when this is over tonight. We'll get through the questions. We might not do the normal long one this evening, because I have a feeling I've got a long evening. I have a long evening in front of me with the internet. But I do want to answer the questions, and I do want to do this because this is 186. I want to feel I get to episode 200 properly. I don't want to feel I get to 200 skipping episodes. Steve, can you not skip questions in at the moment, because that's not helping things. It's very kind of you. I know you're being kind, but yeah. I know you're being kind. Anyway, so what was the next question? Oh, I suppose we've got to answer this one from Steve, but it does feel a bit rude because it has popped in front of all the others. I know he was doing it to be kind, but it just kind of popped in. What happens if the Royal Navy builds the 5 King of 4 Illustrious in 1933, 37 times, and next set 37 onwards? Then the Royal Navy's that much further forward, but also there are probably ships which are not in service by the time war begins because they're probably using them to replace assets. So there's probably, I would say, probably the R's have gone. The R's have all gone. Maybe not, because the Royal Navy was did by about 1936, 37 was 36, 37 was hoping to get up to 20 ships and thought they need to get to 20. So probably they haven't gone, but they are probably seriously working out what they're going to do with them. But that might also offer accelerations for the Vanguard program, which would probably come in at the same time then. If you're that much further on, you've managed to get the armor plates working that much earlier, which means that, honestly, one of the plants hasn't closed down, so that makes that a lot quicker to get that in. And, yeah, it means you've got the King George V's already in service. By the time... Well, that means the Royal Navy starts World War II with probably... At least, because of the lines will be built more quickly, because all the stuff will be worked up for them, having been built the King George V's, you'll probably end up starting World War II with about 2 lines in service, or coming into service in late 1939, early 1940. About the Implacables and Indomitable in service, as well as the Illustriouses coming into service at that sort of time as well. Maybe you might even have 4 Implacables coming into service, and you probably at that point, well, how to put this politely, there isn't anything much Germany and Italy could have done to respond to it, and there isn't anything Japan could do to respond to it, because they're all at the max capacity anyway. So basically, you've just meant that the Royal Navy is now a whole different level stronger than it would have been historically. So now, in the nicest way, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau have got to deal with the fact that the rapid force the Royal Navy can call on is 5 King George V's, renown, probably a modernised repulse, and a modernised hood. Because again, if you've upgraded the infrastructure if you've had those King George V's go through, that's going to lead to the infrastructure being worked up that much earlier, that by the time that you're going to be able to have done more things with the infrastructure you have. Because you've started instead of starting the rearmament in 1937, you've started rearmament in 1933. So yeah,
Nice.
basically, the Germans and the Italians run into a bit of a world of hurt because they're dealing with far more carriers. Far more carriers available, and there's possibly even a scenario where the older carriers especially, have probably been stuck in reserve. Probably ones we're talking about would be Hermes, Argus, possibly Eagle. She's always a bit of a special one, and Furious, and they will probably become the ASW carriers at the beginning of any World War II. So instead of you having Courageous and Ark Royal out, I think. But also, the question is, have you still built Ark Royal in that timeline as well? Because that was the big thing. So if you haven't built a strike carrier in that timeline, then I wouldn't be surprised if the Illustriouses you get are, rather than being orientated around 36 aircraft hangar deck and 50 aircraft overall operational, would probably end up being 40, possibly even 55. They probably end up being Indomitable style air groups, and the easiest way to achieve that with the weight would be to slightly thin down the armor at the top and extend the ship a bit, make the ship actually a bit longer. Is actually probably the cheapest way to do that tonnage wise. Thin down the armor a bit, which would fit with 1933 build, and make it slightly bigger. So you have something which is the sort of illustrious built Ark Royal rather than an illustrious class. Anyway, on to Remulse.
For those of you asking on my Twitch chat, what is in this is technically my right hand, it is a clothes iron. And as for what I'm working on, this is a 3D printable miniature carrying case. And it comes with inlay channels. This is my second printing of it. I am working the inlays into it. And so that it is complete. As far as other orange things,
Back
these
in a
are a set
second.
of pliers. These are a set of cutters. And this is a can of iron brew. If you're seeing something else orange, I can't help you because there's no other orange on my desk.
Okay, so I'm just hallucinating. Good to know.
So, Ramal's question is on the Pensacolas. Do you want to? I do have something to say on this, if I may.
Yeah, I'm not. I think I've managed to actually lose the video stream, possibly, but so I'm trying to work out where I can read the questions.
Ramal asks, question 2: thoughts on the Pensacola class CAs? Do you think the USA made a mistake by removing their torpedo tubes? Do you think the Pensacola is better than the York and County class? Well, a few key points here. The Pensacola's and the Northamptons are heavy cruisers by retroactive definition.
They're scout cruisers, which are made for heavy cruisers because they have 8-inch guns.
Yeah, so that's an important thing to bear in mind. The Portlands are Northamptons that have been turned into proper heavy cruisers by giving them a decent armored belt.
Mm-hmm.
But the Northamptons and the Pensacolas are absolutely not heavy cruisers. They are scout cruisers, or they're what we call 8-inch gun cruisers. They are basically the evolution of the light armored cruiser concept, carrying 8-inch guns. And with that context in mind, they really don't compare to the counties at all. The counties were designed around the concept that they could be armored against their own guns, but as built were not. But the idea was that they always could be.
Built for, not with.
Whereas the Pensacola's and the Northamptons just were not, ever, going to resist
Honestly,
8-inch shell fire.
I don't like to say ships are better than another, because it depends on what you're building it for, and you should judge it by how good it is at doing that role. However, if I had a choice and I was having to go to combat in one of those 3 classes, I'd pick a County over a Pensacola and a Pensacola over a York. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to be fair, the Yorks did suffer 100% loss rate in the war, which is probably not good. I'm thinking.
Cut price counties,
And,
which actually cost them as much.
Small point of order for my Twitch chat.
Yeah.
One, the answer to the question, that is red rattle can primer that worked its way onto my hand. And 2, while I am not as tight on language as Dr. Clarke is, I am slightly more aggressive on comments on personal stuff.
Yep.
So you might want to avoid Muppet. Just.
Basically, we all have our own inclinations. How many neutral spy rings were used during World War II? Tons. In the nicest way, I'm fairly sure Britain. Norway likes to send to Britain every year a Christmas tree.
Mm.
I'm fairly sure Britain owes Portugal a lot more than a Christmas tree every year.
Yeah, but we can't give them like a bottle of sherry. They'd object.
I think possibly we should be sending them something very large and very gratuitous.
A very large bottle of sherry?
I was thinking more dozen chocolates each.
Per person in the population? Yeah.
Yes.
What if you get somebody who's allergic to chocolate?
We'll send them some vegan chocolates for that percentage.
Okay, how do you make chocolate vegan? How do you suck the life and the joy out of chocolate? How? How does one do this?
You are going to learn all sorts of amazing things when you come here.
Yeah.
How do you suck the
Just wait
love
until you
and
see
joy
wait until you see the list of things which can be made gluten free.
Yes, well, that's because you people have food standards.
Yeah. Steve Clarke, it is popular tier ranking historical military leaders. What do most commentators try to do this in YouTube ranking most misunderstand when it comes to naval leadership? They usually think it's all about winning battles.
Mm.
And battles matter, but usually the reason you win them isn't because of something that decisively happens in the battle. That's why you end up with people going, they won the battle because of this simple maneuver. And you go, no, they won the battle because they managed to wreck their opponent's logistics system. So frankly, they could do whatever they liked in running, and they were still going to run out of fuel.
Or more importantly, they won the battle because they moved certain, or their intelligence was better because they have these ships in this position, the other guy has this ships, or
Yeah.
they won the battle because of this and this.
They were able to get there the firstest with the mostest.
You fight the battles
Yep.
with what you have available, not what you'd like to have there. That's always the thing. You fight the battles with what you have available. Me and BT are not going to be in good news. I've got an engineer coming this week. No, I'm not looking forward to it. The last one who came out actually ended up looking at my wall where I had my certificates from when I was an IT technician. And I may or may not, my mum may or may not have put them up in her office, literally for their visit. And because I don't, for some reason, if you look around my room, you'll never find my certificates up because I keep them in a drawer. They are things which I have, which were very nice to earn, but they're stuck in a drawer. They appear though sometimes when they are put up by someone else. And he looked at them and he went, "You have more qualifications than me." Yep. I've spent the last 20 minutes trying to tell you something, and you have been smiling politely at me the whole time. Yep. But you knew I didn't know what I was talking about, didn't you? Well, I thought it was very impressive, the amount of stuff coming out, of effluence coming out. I felt you were trying gainfully. Answer is you don't know what the frigate's wrong with us, so why don't you send another engineer or run some more tests?
Knight 6831, at the risk of offending you, that explains so much.
That's cruel.
That explains so much.
Okay, can I ask who's doing all the smiley faces and hearts in the chat? Because that's
Not
disturbing
me this time.
You know that they never identify themselves, right?
I know, but someday they might. I still think it's Knight, because Knight already claims it isn't them. But they're usually the first to claim it isn't them. And usually, like with farts, when you're a teenage boy, the first person to claim it wasn't them usually is the one who did it.
Unless it's particularly impressive, in which case you may want to lay claim to it.
Yes.
See, I always just broke into a for channel appropriate phraseology, sloop eating grin, and just outed myself immediately because reactions were funny.
It does help. It does help the longer.
But then I also had to compete against my father, who just especially after he had his gallbladder pulled.
Zacco.
Oh dear God. Oh dear God.
So you mean it's like the poodle when he farts and he wags his tail, goes, "Oh yes, I'm happy. I'm wagging my tail." And you're just going, "You're just wafting it towards me. That's not nice." Even Yang, with the increased estrangement between the US and EU, would more European navies move away from the Mark 41 and to silver, and from the FLM 2500 to the MT30? Honestly, to the MT30 is a possibility because that's quite a mature design and it really is to extent interchangeable. And quite a lot have already been moving in the direction of the MT30, more because what happens is the Americans produce a design that's dominant for about a couple of decades. Then Rolls-Royce comes with a design that's dominant for a couple of decades. Then the new American design comes in that's dominant for a couple of decades. And that's how it goes with the gas turbines. Literally, they just take turns to be dominant. And it is about time. It is about time for the MT30 period, basically. That's been building up for a while. So that wouldn't be that anything to do with that now. The Mark 41, though, is a very, very mature and very useful system. And as much as I love the Silver, and it does have the whole speed of launch and a far better ability to deal with cold launch missiles than the Mark 41 necessarily has in all variants. Please note what I said there, has in all variants. Because the thing is, when the Mark 41 was originally designed, there was no such thing as a cold launch missile. So they are either having to add it in, it can't be added in, or they are modifying future ones, or some of the current ones have been modified. Whereas the Silver was. The Silver doesn't have the same range of missiles. The Silver just fundamentally doesn't have the same range of missiles. And so I think what you might find is that some navies do a Royal Navy and have a duality of it. And have Silver and Mark 41 VLS. I think some navies will have a duality. I think that's how they'll approach it.
Although if I'm being super cynical, I wouldn't be surprised if certain EU powers decide to either jointly or independently develop totally not a Mark 41 clone, in a similar fashion to what Beijing has been doing with certain pieces of Western tech for the last couple of years, and just have their own system that they can support and or retrofit onto extant Mark 41 cells.
Well, you don't almost need to do that because there is already the A70 Silver, which is pretty much near enough this makes no difference to Silver Mark 41.
Case in point, I rest my case.
And that's been around for a few years. When I say it's been around for a few years, it's been an option for a while. The Silver A70 is able to take Tomahawk and Scalp and all sorts of things. And if you can fit Tomahawk, you can fit everything else in. It can also take Aster. It can quad pack missiles. It's an interesting system, is the good old Silver. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Silver A70 is what we'd be talking about, and it already sort of exists. Doesn't have the thing though isn't the VLS, it's the operating system and the coding which goes behind it, which allows the Mark 41 to be used with all those things. You'd have to pay money to turn the Silver into A70 into the Mark 41 VLS, because you'd have to do a lot of weapons development to make the systems talk to each other and work with each other. But there again, we've got a whole new generation of weapon systems coming in, and people want to start spending money immediately to show they're doing something. And weapons development tech like that is an easy way to spend money. And show you're doing something. Yep. So, yeah.
And it's also a really flashy way to spend money that's very difficult or understandably impossible to show the results of.
Yeah. The interesting thing is going to be radars. That's the big issue. It's very difficult to say. It's very difficult. There are, barring the UK and France, to an extent Italy as well, it's very difficult to find a mature radar development system that can be developed into something which is, I don't want to say the same as Aegis, but can provide a comparable equivalency to. Not the same. I'm not claiming the same. Please note, I'm saying this directed to camera before someone says, you can't do that. No. It would take decades to get something the same as Aegis. It really would. Just look at the poor Chinese and how they're struggling to get there. It really is a lot of maturity and a lot of interesting design work to get to and testing to get to something equivalent to Aegis. But to get to something which is of a equivalency, a satisfactory equivalency, or comparable equivalency, i.e. a 80%, 90% solution maybe, probably the Type 45 and the Horizon system is the closest you've got as a basis to work from in Europe. The closest you've got to work from as a basis to build up from. Please note the various codicils going on there.
Knight, I don't know what I said that you were construed to mean that I'm against food safety standards. So I'm going to need you to highlight that comment for me so I can
I think that's
correct my
because you don't
correct my statement.
you were surprised that Knight weren't surprised Knight eats vegan chocolate.
Yes, I just feel like vegan chocolate is just
Look,
sad.
There are reasons some people need to eat vegan chocolate. They are, and I will say this. But speaking as someone who, because of my sister and other family members who are gluten free, who do have to have these stuff, I will say this: if you like it, good for you. Because compared to the stuff which is the normal stuff which I eat, it tastes nothing like it. But if you like it, that's good for you. Then you're good. Personally, myself, it was. Admittedly, this was a few years ago, and I hear it has got better since. But I had the vegan chocolate, some vegan chocolate, which my sister got as her Easter egg about a decade or so ago. And she gave me a piece and went, "Try this." And I went, "Okay," tried it, it was the driest chocolate I've ever eaten. And that's the only way I can describe it. The driest chocolate I've ever eaten.
I mean, technically, dark chocolate is intrinsically vegetarian, but
well, technically, it could be classified that I had a vegetarian meal this evening because I had my protein came from cheese.
But it doesn't even include dairy.
That's vegan.
But yeah, sorry, vegan.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, he says, trumping in some milk chocolate, because talking about it inspired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the milk is the first ingredient. Then skimmed milk powder is number 5. Number 7 is milk fat. Yeah. It's a minimum 20% milk. Actual 23%.
Okay, so if we go for Stephen Meyer's next question, favorite backyard shed invention. Was it the Rolls-Royce Phantom, which the guy who designed it basically took it to his backyard shed and tinkered with it till it looked perfect?
Not sure.
I think it was one of the Rolls-Royce. It was either the Ghost or the Phantom, I think.
Not sure. I think my favourite thing is the guy who worked out the number of 303 machine guns that the fighters would need and came up with 8. In fact, he was helped by his daughter, who was about 12 or 13 at the time.
Yeah.
If we're talking if we're talking to military history, the Sten gun or the guys who invented I don't know if you could quite call it back garden shed, but
the grease gun.
The guys who invented some of the more interesting SOE stuff.
That was definitely it was in someone's back garden, and it was in a shed, but it was an estate, and it was the shed looked like a barn to most people.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say this, but you're all politely.
The question is your favorite, so this doesn't mean no one's right or wrong. It's their favorite, so.
I know, but I
have an additional addendum to that. If we're talking about ones in my day-to-day life, the individual
who saw my sister go through then.
I'm not watching the YouTube stream, so
there she is. Yes.
But anyway,
we've been having fun on the internet this evening.
But anyway, for my day-to-day life, it would be the Maxis wire puller.
Finally worked.
Yay.
May not have been invented in a back garden shed, but it was invented in a guy's shop, so you know. Yeah. And then Southwire bought it, and I don't know, like it's turned out mostly okay.
Yeah.
I like the fact that in a surgical kind of theatre kit, you will get a teaspoon. You know, you've got all the different types of scalpels and you know, clamps, arterial forceps, all that kind of stuff, and a teaspoon. Which,
Do I,
from what I can,
do I want to know what the meaning of the teaspoon is?
no, it's just a teaspoon. It's just
It's there to scoop stuff out when you need to scoop it
Yeah.
out.
yep.
So, very quickly, my favourite backyard shed invention is the high-pressure steam engine. Richard Davithick do be cooking in South Wales.
Lee, I'm not certain that we should get you a high-end PC because then it won't run on Steam, and I feel like that would make yours make you sad in some way.
I'll fit a
Steam is nice and all. Steam is nice and all, but it has its problems.
Nigerian, would it be correct that the UK Trident missile will have to be within the Dreadnought class lifetime replaced by European alternatives, as Trident design-wise is nearly 50 years old? Honestly, it's already built into the Dreadnought class that they are likely to have a successor to Trident take over the Trident role. We have currently Trident D5, Trident 2, I think it is. Second generation Trident already. We're already onto the second generation Trident. And the whole discussion as to what would come next is an interesting one. Now, Britain, as always, has claimed it has strategic autonomy because it has spread its work for these things between joint work with France and joint work with America.
Yeah,
Which was a lovely
this
thing
is one of.
Fleet. Can I finish?
Of course.
This is one of those lovely things which made sense in the end of history post-90s world of that we were living in for the last 30-odd years. It didn't really make sense to anyone who was slightly more worried about things. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a slightly more increased organic onboarding of capabilities. Even sharing, whilst it's at the moment everyone's going, we can share with France. Yeah, that's not always proved that good either, because France is unashamedly independent. In fact, if you could say America's becoming like any nation, and therefore we have any basis for understanding, it could probably be the French, who, whilst they are always a lovely nation and lovely people, have always been shameless and quite open and honest about the fact that the nation they are responsible for, the nation their government takes care of, the nation their government worries about, is their own. And that's what they focus on. And there is nothing wrong with that, because that's who elect them. They are elected the government of France, not the government of the world. So France should come first.
I'm now worrying about the whole kind of, is Trump de Gaulle or de Gaulle Trump?
Let's not go there, because that's just disturbing.
Yeah.
Imagining Trump as de Gaulle is just... I'm not sure which is worse, or de Gaulle as Trump. Oh, that's just... No. And no one suggests that as an alternate history. Just don't. Speaking of that, the vote will go live this evening, so no, don't add any more. It hasn't gone live because of internet issues, but it is already written up and done, so I'm not adding any more things into it. But yeah, it's a case of, will it be European alternatives? Potentially you'll have a joint program with the French for succession. Potentially it'll be a joint Anglo-American program. The thing is, it could end up being an Anglo-American-French program. There are lots of options for how it could go. There are lots of countries, I will say this, which are looking... I'm just finishing Fleet, then you can come. There are lots of countries which are looking at currently the scenario in Ukraine, the scenario in other places in the world, and the issues that have been happened around the world, and are wondering if they need to acquire an independent capability. It might not be submarine based, but you don't necessarily need to use the Trident. Just like Trident doesn't necessarily need to be used from a submarine. You know, there is options. Anyway, carry on, Fleet.
Basically, whatever form the succession will take will basically depend on what the security situation is when that comes up. If in the unlikely event that the relations with the US have deteriorated, it will likely be an Anglo-French, possibly Anglo-French-Italian program, depending on whether or not the Italians are looking at pursuing.
Do the Italians have a battleship or cruise that they want to stick missiles on, and it's still around?
They'll probably also go. Well, it won't be SSBN. It'll be SSB. The Italians will probably go with some form of conventional ballistic missile submarine.
Why though?
Why? They don't have to.
Why would you want to sit that in the Mediterranean? There's no space to put that in the Mediterranean.
And
You-
also,
The thing is, no, you would basically lean on Soviet bastion doctrine, and you'd
Well,
create
yeah,
a you'd create a
Too
bastion.
small and too crowded.
Well, you want to stick that in the Adriatic? No. No, not Italy actually has this large areas of granite in the nicest way they can use that if they need to. The fact that those areas are also occasionally volcanically active will leave to one side. It's fun parts of geography, but yeah, there is all sorts of weird stuff being talked about the US and all these things. The advice I always give is always have a plan for the worst, but don't don't jump on it happening before it's happened. You know, always have a plan ready for any situation you find yourself in, but don't go in and don't decide it's already happened before it's actually happened, because you might be pleasantly surprised. You might also find out things work out differently, because again, this is the thing. Currently, we have Trump being where he is. But if you remember back to the first Trump presidency, he also started off being very friendly with all the dictators and all these things. And then when they decided to do something which he didn't want them to do, he was probably the most aggressive at hunting them down. So that's the thing you have to deal with. You have to consider.
This is the basic problem. This is the main problem with Trump. Inconsistency.
Yeah.
As far as his allies are concerned.
So, the thing is, this year it's all this. Within 6 weeks, let alone 6 months, it might be completely different.
But that's not something. But
Give
that's
it about
not
6 hours.
But that's not something that is actually sustainable as far as his allies are concerned. They basically have to treat him now as always being inconsistent and therefore unable to back them.
Which is why you need your independent capability. Which is where your independent capability comes from. And even in the UK, I saw some very interesting things who were going, oh, because we have a shared stockpile of missiles, etc., with the Americans, they could shut us down into... We have a shared stockpile of booster units, which we share the maintenance of, but they still belong to us. And
taking those away from us is an act of war.
They're certified for years, not weeks. So it's nothing going to be too dramatic.
But also, touching them is an act of war. It's not a minor thing.
Yeah, and it's a case of there's a lot of people who don't know how do I put this? I don't know why it is with defense. People give them more credence, but there were people on the internet who, when COVID hit, were suddenly experts in virulent diseases. And then they were experts in economics, and then they were experts in education, and now they're experts in politics, and then they're experts in defense. And you read these commentators who write this commentary, and you'd think they were our God-given experts on every single topic.
It's what I like to term the Gonzalo Lira effect, named after the thankfully now dead former not quite a journalist who Laser Pig sparred with at one point. They're grifters. They're grifters who refashion themselves into an expert on whatever is popular, will talk with some degree of confidence with information that sounds mostly correct, and then whatever the next big thing is that's trending in the news cycle the next week, they will suddenly be an expert on that as well.
Yes, and it's non-stop. It's never-ending. And you get them at all levels. Trust me, there's a gent down the pub who... How do I put this? has now politely learned that there are topics you do not want to spread into in a pub in Cornwall, because he was talking about how the Royal Navy operated, and he suddenly realised he was surrounded by 24 ex-Royal Navy, who were all looking at him, and there was me and going, now, I'm the one you least want to have this argument with, because of what I will do to you in an argument, because I'm trained to argue. But you probably most want to have an argument with because I'm the least likely to immediately reach for a large blunt object.
Please note the Bruships panel does not condone reaching for large blunt objects.
No, we don't.
No.
But-
It should already be in your hand at this point when you need it.
No,
No.
we don't. No,
No.
we do
And
not.
Sharp objects are generally preferred.
No, Dan, we don't. No,
we
Dan,
don't.
we don't.
No, we don't want that. But no, it was a case
You're
of
not endorsing violence against people or persons in a real world setting.
no, we
Only in Minecraft.
But in the scenario where we're talking about, I said they were all these and they were all playing pool and snooker. We had a pool table and a snooker table, and so they all have the cues in their hands. And you're going,
Oh,
shut
Question
up,
is,
mate, leave.
Question is, Alex, did that other gentleman take a cue? Get it? Get it? Get it? Get it? Get it? Do you get it?
Fleet,
I would like
you
to.
were just communicating to us earlier about how you want to be seen more seriously.
No. I want to be less of a punching bag. There's a difference.
But this is the perfect moment to be reaching for my blunt object with which. Okay, I won't hit him with it. I will just.
He left. He
Will
left
be
quickly.
traveling in a ballistic arc, and it might so happen that he ends up near it.
He
of
was.
course.
Before anyone wonders what they were getting, he was suggesting that the Royal Navy don't go out into deep water anymore and never spend more than a day at sea. And apparently,
That's okay.
all the submarine trips, including the Falklands, are faked. There wasn't actually a Falklands War, and I was in there going, there are literally 2 Falklands War veterans in this group, and they also happen to be the 2 standing closest to you.
Are you sure that's the position you want to have today? Again, I will remind chat now that I've said that fated frigating word, Minecraft. If you want to pay me 5 to 10 grand so that I can get out of this increasingly spiraling country, I will happily set up a Minecraft server for you.
All we know is Runon has now gone from being against their fates to bargaining with their fate. They are on the path of acceptance.
Yep.
Bug Guy T29. Were there any serious plans to save HMS Renown after World War II? There were some, but unfortunately they didn't come. Nothing much came about. But there were some plans. There was, I think, the Renown Association, the Men and Officers Association of Renown, the Renown Crew Association were semi-seriously shopping around trying to do it. Similar to the Warspite Association.
Was it quite a renowned association?
That's what it's like.
I think I can hear Dr. Clarke's groans from this side of the Atlantic. No Discord needed.
No, none needed. Hendrik Beaufort. Hendrik, do me a favor. Can you send that question again? Possibly written in English.
Something about a wood superstructure. Anyway, Black Force. Is there a possibility for the defense of Crete to work in World War II?
I've done a whole video about that.
Oh, there were many.
Basically, there are lots of options for making Crete work. The first and foremost is just leave the person in charge who's been in charge since the first deployment of British personnel there, because he had a working plan of slotting everyone into it, rather than keep changing around the staff officers and not allowing them to overlap, and the commanding officers not allowing them to overlap, so they don't know what each other's planned, and they come in and have a completely different idea. Yeah.
Stafford, Stafford, for 5 to 10 grand, there are many things that I will do and few things that I won't do. Much like our leerless feeder here, Dr. Clarke. I am mercenary.
Yeah.
Have money. I will travel. Although I
Can't-
do like to sleep in my own bed, so there may be some lie to that truth. But, I stand by what I said.
Oh, we've been joined by Foxo and Dragon. This could be fun. Colin Cameron,
Oh.
how long do you think an Indomitable class design with the single tool hanger would have lasted post-war? How many of
Longer.
them do you have? Because the more you have, the more likely, the longer it's going to last. But yeah, they're interesting ones. Stafford Thompson, how would the M2 have influenced tactics if it had succeeded as the first carrier submarine? Well, for starters, the Nazis would have had a carrier submarine, and that would have been just interesting. If carrier submarines had been remotely successful and had actually worked out as a concept, the world could have been a very interesting place. But I think the big trouble you have for a carrier submarine concept to work is the countries which are looking at it, they have proper aircraft carriers. And by pretty much every measure other than stealth, a proper aircraft carrier works better than a submarine aircraft carrier. And when it comes to stealth, there are different ways of achieving it. There is tactical stealth, where you can hide underwater and people won't see you. And there's strategic stealth, where you run a whole load of different operations so the enemy goes completely bonkers trying to track where you are, and you attack Taranto. Please carry on, Fleet.
Mark Harkness, I'll take it, but I really don't think I'm a holy warrior clad in plate armor with a broadsword. But anyway.
I'd just like to, I think like M2 was more an experiment on carrying aircraft aboard submarines rather than an actual submersible aircraft carrier in the same way something like I-400 is. But
I would agree, but basically if it had succeeded, you go from that line of predication.
Yeah, but that aside, if the idea of a submarine that carries aircraft goes forward, then yes, you will likely see them proliferate in the same way that there was a limited proliferate. Well, I think you'd see them proliferate in a limited fashion. In the same way that the cruiser submarine proliferated in a limited fashion. Because look at how many fleet boats and normal subs were built during the interwar period.
I'm thinking actually.
And look how many large submarines were built in the interwar period. They were built, but there weren't that many. Same thing I think applies here.
I'm just thinking that imagine the fight with Goering over getting aircraft built and allocated for the submarines of the Reichsmarine, the Kriegsmarine.
Yeah, I mean that was
it was hard enough to try. They failed to get them for an aircraft carrier. Imagine getting them for a submarine.
Well,
wouldn't you just have to bribe what's his name, the guy that Goring has got in charge of aircraft procurement? Throw him a big enough bribe and some money and alcohol.
Well,
he would do whatever companies wanted.
They usually require things stronger than alcohol, sadly enough. Stuff we don't discuss on this channel, but yes, they require things stronger.
I was wondering
why you get that alcohol.
They really like the snortable icing sugar. What can I say? They really like the snortable icing sugar.
That is possibly the best euphemism for that I have ever heard.
Thank you. Remember, don't snort icing sugar. It's really not good for you.
Mm-hmm.
No.
And if you know, and if you know what we're referring to, don't do that either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're bad kids.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm slightly. Because I'd have thought Dönitz might actually be able to persuade Goering to let him do it.
But that's going to be a bit late in the war.
Yeah, at that
if
point.
they haven't got them in production before the war begins, then they're in trouble. Admittedly,
Wasn't
it would be
Jonas
interesting.
was in charge of the sub program before the war, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
but integrating them with the wolf pack program would be an interesting one.
There's
Because
also the problem you've got. The problem you've got. Excuse me. Is that yes, Dönitz is in charge of procurement for U-boats
are you
during the
having
pre-war during the pre-war period. However, up until about 1942, the U-boat arm always played second fiddle to the surface fleet.
Yeah. Are
Yes,
you
that's what that.
fleets? Just a small question. Are you having the very fruity juice, or are you currently imbibing the slightly fizzy, sometimes barley juice?
I am not commenting on that.
All this depends
Smart
on is
move.
You
how
may
much
make up
can
your-
you bribe
may
Ernst
make-
Dudette?
You may
have
break.
milk.
Break up, make up. I can't speak.
Oh,
It could just be the coughing, or it could be coming down with something.
yeah.
Either or is possible.
Yes,
You could be coming down with
I think
something.
called a
It's called
hangover
love,
tomorrow.
baby.
No, not really. I think I'm ill.
Well, we knew that.
No, I mean actually ill.
So, what ship you were on looked the worst? Ship I've been on that looked the worst. I don't think
That's
I
a
can
tough one.
officially name the one I've been on that looked the worst because which looked like an actual horror film.
Do we mean in terms of?
Design quality. That would be. Oof.
I mean,
That'd be big
we weren't technically allowed to go on board. We weren't able to go on to Garden Island where they had one of the Canberra class,
no,
which are
If it's
they are interesting. They are definitely a triumph of design over function.
yeah. Honestly, I mean, I find submarines terrifying.
You know you love them, really.
No, they're terrifying. I'm trying to think what the smallest, oldest submarine I've been on is.
Did you go on the one in the harbour in Gothenburg?
Yes. She's not the oldest though. She because
No.
Alliance is old.
What about the one next to her though? Not the submarine, the Monitor.
Oh yeah, her. Yeah, she was basically a submarine, isn't she? She kind of just pops up.
the ugliest ship I've ever been on was basically I went to France a while ago, and I was on one of those hydrofoils, and honestly I don't like them. They're just a flat slab with two pointy bits on the front, and then it ends in a flat slab at the other end. And yes, you got the pointy bit out the front as well, but it's just the most boring looking ship I can think of.
I was so glad you said hydrofoil there, because I thought you were going to say you'd been on the Hosh, and I was going to say you had to tell you weren't Doctor Who.
Look,
Personally, probably MS Princess D-Ways. I do not like the front of her. It's just flat.
Yeah.
Okay. It's gonna sound weird, but it was a Swedish car ferry I went on 3 years ago.
Okay.
I can't say its name because I'll get hunted down by MEP. But apparently it meant Big Dragon. And it was a car ferry.
Okay.
It was painted bright yellow. I'm sure it was only painted so you couldn't see how rusted it was.
Yeah.
You've just reminded me the ferries that must die.
Oh, the ferries in Sweden.
What ferry that must die?
Oh.
There is a design of ferry, the little ferries that you see zipping around. They had them in Halifax as well.
Yeah.
They are terrible.
Why must they die?
Every time Dan is around them and has access to a gun, which can be trained, he is trying to... In this way, he was holding firemen hostage in Halifax Harbour at one point. Let alone the ferries.
For me, I've been on a couple of ferries or tourist craft that could qualify, but barring those, I'm going to commit sacrilege here and say it's a close run fight between Salt Lake and Olympia.
That's brave.
Okay,
Salt-
so we now have
Where's
to be
Salt
very,
Lake?
we now have to be very, a moment's silence for our good friend Runon in her soon-to-be departed state, as a
Yeah.
large number of U.S. naval cruiser enthusiasts hunt her down. She is the
Well, the
wrong
problem is
side of the
a large
pond to be
number of
able to get
US
away with this.
There's probably a large number of those U.S. Navy cruiser enthusiasts that would probably start fighting with the other portion of the U.S. Navy cruiser enthusiasts about whether or not Salt Lake looks better as a CG or a CA. Because I think I'd love to, or actually she'd be a CL because she was a Cleveland. I think she looks great in her original factory built configuration. I think with that large missile house on the back, she doesn't look horrendous, but she looked better as an all-gun cruiser.
No, aren't you thinking of Little Rock?
Whatever the ship in Buffalo is, the big one.
Little Rock.
Little Rock.
Okay.
Little Rock. Salt Lake is the one with more interesting marriage practices.
Okay, let's move on quickly to Bomber Boy's question. What would the Pacific War have been like had the US decided to standardize on the pom-pom instead of the Bofors?
Well, you've got more defense against the kamikaze, but the problem you have with the pom-pom is that it's much less flexible and much less space efficient than the Bofors. It's not a bad weapon, but you can fit a single or twin mount Bofors where you just physically can't fit a single pom-pom.
Single pom-pom's pretty small.
No,
It is.
Single pom-poms are very small.
Very small.
It is, but
I don't think you've got the stats right there.
Remember, we see pom-poms put on motor torpedo boats.
I said it Bofors. It's more just, I'm thinking, you can get
It's
more.
pom-poms more stereotypically in its octuple mount, which is big.
Yes.
I don't know.
The
I know this is single.
You can bring up the octuple mount and say that takes up a lot of space, but also gives you a lot of firepower.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad weapon. I'm just saying that the Bofors, in terms of how it goes from single to twin mount to quad mount, is slightly more flexible.
I think the quad pom-poms actually are smaller mounting than the quad Bofors.
Oh yeah, but you can get a pom-pom where you can't get a quad Bofors. I will absolutely agree on that. But what I would say is that when it comes to the sort of engagements you're dealing with in the Pacific War, the ability of the longer barrel Bofors to I'm going to reach out and touch you slightly further out is what you really need for most of the Pacific War. This calculus changes when you get to 44, 45, and suddenly, oh, that aircraft's coming. And it's coming. And it's coming. And it's coming towards us.
I think you are. I think the distance is. Let's put it this way: there are good arguments you made. If you already have the pom-pom in service, it's very difficult to justify bringing the Bofors into service. I know because the Royal Navy tried to make them, and eventually the Royal Navy it's just commonality of ammunition in the Pacific. It's just commonality of ammunition in the Pacific. But
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it's a bad weapon. I just wanted to do a quick, side by side so people could get an idea of what the trade-offs would be. But if the US has just to get back to the actual meat of the question.
Yeah, but the
if
thing is,
the
I
US
don't think
has
the trade-offs you've just given are correct. Because I'm mentally doing the sums for the single pom-pom mount and a single Bofors mount in my head and going through them. And whilst I could be wrong, the differential does not seem to be... There doesn't seem to be enough there that there's going to be much of a weight of stage difference.
Yeah, no, I mean, as I said,
the pom-pom to have a longer barrel.
Well, that is what the Bofors is. The Bofors is a development of the pom-pom. Basically, Sweden took a look at the pom-pom and said we can make it better.
Isn't the big difference the loading system, with the pom-pom having a higher burst rate of fire
Yeah.
but they're both having the highest sustained rate of fire. Which would-
No, they had about the same on paper rate of fire. The difference is that certainly with the octuple pom pom, you could get up to, I think it was 108 rounds continuous belt feed, whereas the Bofors was stuck with the 5 or 4 round clips.
Yeah.
Well, if I was remembering correctly, the
and you-
Bofors
well,
you
yes.
could really
One at a time.
it was firing.
Yeah.
You
So
couldn't
basically,
do that with the Bofors.
the
So you
thing,
could do that with pom poms.
yeah, the thing with the Bofors is, yes, it's technically a 5-round clip, but if you just keep feeding, your magazine's basically limitless.
Don't you have
If
to
you
pull the
just-
clip out though?
Nope.
No,
Nope.
You can
right.
just
Oh, yeah.
feed.
it doesn't. It pulls it through.
Yeah.
Mm.
You can just feed and feed and feed and
No, I was thinking of
feed
a
and
different
feed.
drive.
Yeah, but it is
Yeah,
gonna
never-
wear out your loaders. You do need to have rotate team. Let's see. I will see what I can do.
Yeah, which is basically the shit of the shitless air gun crew.
Hmm.
Yeah, apparently that's not just eye candy for all the riveting rosies.
Oh shit. Okay.
Linguistics.
Sorry.
Ronan.
Runon said ship, by the way, before anyone else. Runon said ship.
Yes.
Now,
Moving on.
right then. Next question. Steve Clarke,
Oh.
which ship design, in the opinion of the panel members, aged worse than its contemporaries due to design failures or unforeseen technological change?
Both.
No, we're not going to go for the low-hanging fruit. We'll go for something pretty good. Which ship in this? I'd say you can make an argument, especially when you're dealing with capital ships, that they made the wrong. They bumped for the wrong thing. I've regularly made an argument that Rodney and Nelson are not bad ships, but they did bump on the wrong things when you look at the other design options they were considering.
I mean, I will point out quickly.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Dr.
No,
Clarke.
carry on.
Please.
Carry on. You jumped in.
I know you say you don't want to go for the low-hanging fruit, but I actually am. It's Hosh. Hosh, when commissioned, ages out far quicker than any of her contemporaries. Just because of the weird warped state she's in. She's not got the clean lines and good firing arcs of her three half sisters that are full high freeboard barbette ships. She doesn't have the heavier secondary battery and 4-gun broadside of the admirals. She lacks the speed of some of the Italian ironclads. And she has a very low freeboard. She, in terms of capital ships commissioned around the 1890s, she just, even if we don't count the Royal Sovereigns, she still ages out aggressively quickly compared to any of her contemporaries. It's almost unique. If you look at her three half sisters, they don't age out nearly as quick.
I would
Look,
say one of the other things you have to sort of consider, and why is Nightbot going quite so nuts on poor God Emperor
Donald Rumsfeld.
Yeah, stop capsing things. Nightbot doesn't like that. I would say it, and I was mentally thinking this while sort of checking some things on my phone, because I can't do everything on the computer at the moment, so I've got the phone doing separate internet stuff. You did bring up the admirals, and that's kind of like when we compare aircraft to the F-22. In every generation, there is the frigate around and find out. And the admirals were their generation's frigate around, find out tool. They really were. You frigate around too much, one of these is going to turn up, or maybe a pair of them. And that's the moment at which you really do find out. And I think that's a bit of a it's like you shouldn't really compare and start judging every aircraft to the F-22, because the F-22, it's a very good aircraft, but it's designed as an air dominance platform, and in that it is supreme. It starts to compound when you yeah. And the thing is, Hosh to me was always going to find her niche not being necessarily being one of the ships in the battle line, not the lead ship by any such means, but being another ship in the battle line, which she did do. And her other role is, to an extent, is as a colonial enforcement tool. She was something you could send out on its own around the colonies, and if it wasn't available when you needed to form up your battle fleet, were you going to cry?
No.
No. So it has a use in that sense. What's the problem is when you start comparing these things to the figure out and find out, or you try and pretend it's something it's not. You try and pretend it is a frontline battle asset, which is brilliant, which is not.
I'd also say the Indomitable class carriers.
Yes. Didn't mean the Implacable class, because Indomitable was the subclass of the Illustrious.
Oh, yeah. Indomitable and Implacable, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
They got the right idea that we needed to increase the hangar square footage. They failed to realize we needed to increase the square cubage.
To be fair, that's because they were making the assessment. You have to remember the assessment was that based on the aircraft they had coming in at the time, and they were still using the armored flight deck, and they were still sort of rushing through the design study, which was design study predicated on the 36 design study, which produced the Illustrious class. It's basically that's the problem.
If more of the aircraft had the wings that kind of go backwards instead of upwards, then it wouldn't have been an issue, or not for quite a long time.
The interesting thing is Ark Royal, because she had a very high hangar, and Eagle as well also had a very high hangar, and those two are two of the carriers which are lost during World War II. And Eagle had a glorious hangar. I mean, this is the thing, as me and Drac have talked about quite often. Is
no, Glorious had a glorious hangar.
No, Glorious did not have a glorious hangar. Glorious's hangar was not glorious in any stretch from the imagination, and Furious's hangar was actually worse because someone had the bright idea of putting the exhaust down it. We'll leave that to one side.
That is a genius idea.
Someone in the British naval architecture was, I think the phrase appropriate for this channel and appropriate for the time could be described as chasing the dragon. Either way, they're good ships, but they do fit their requirement at the time, and they are built for that time. Anyway, Ethan Yang, I think we've answered that one earlier, because we got onto Trident replacements, because we had a question from Knight, if I remember correctly. Ramol, thoughts on the Pensacola class cruisers? Do you think the USN made a mistake by removing their torpedo tubes? No. Because
we did that one.
Do you think the Pensacola is better than the York and County class?
No.
I said I would prefer to be on a county if I was in a war, but if I had to choose between a Pensacola
Hang on,
and York,
Dr. Clarke, we did this.
I'm sure we did that one, but I just did it quickly. Couldn't remember. Black Horse, can you expand on why cannons were the limiting factor for the United States in the Age of Sail? Because they didn't have a lot of foundries to start producing them. You need to set up quite a lot of hefty infrastructure and be able to support a lot of hefty infrastructure to get those sort of things working. And for the US in the period from independence to about the War of 1812, they really don't invest in enough. You have to start a lot of infrastructure. So you have to be able to... One of the things the British benefit from is they're just gradually expanding existing infrastructure, which tends to be cheaper than creating infrastructure from scratch. If you want to build something which is going to have... If you want to suddenly churn out somewhere literally 1,000 cannon, that's going to be a hefty amount of infrastructure to be able to churn out 1,000 cannon, even if you are spreading it over 10 years.
And the British are building on infrastructure that was started by Henry VIII.
7th.
Was it 7th or 8th? I thought for the cannon it was the 8th more.
The cannon was the 8th. The cannon was the 8th, but the original foundries, the bronze foundries, were started by the 7th.
Yeah.
So, the iron cannon work comes from Henry VIII. The fat cannon foundries that originally starts from come from Henry VII.
Yeah. So
Because they're the ones
and-
that make the early bombards, aren't they?
Yeah.
That the British adopt,
Yeah.
which sort of predate America.
I mean, they date
Yeah.
from just around the time that Europeans refound America.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Swedes, I think, have been doing it for about the same sort of time, which is where you get things like Bofors, people like that. I think
Which is
they've
now
been
owned
going
by BAE, and I did have this enjoyable discussion because I had to explain to someone recently that BAE is not an American company.
Oh.
And please note that person is not as far from the halls of power and government in the United Kingdom as you would like to believe. They didn't
need
realise
to watch
that BAE.
that
They
today.
didn't realise BAE stood for British Aerospace Engineering.
Oh, that's what the E stands for.
Yeah,
Yeah, because they started as an aircraft conglomerate, didn't they?
they started as
BAE.
we forced all our aircraft companies to conglomerate.
Which was
Yeah.
a mistake.
Yeah,
Well, it was either that or lose them. To be fair, given the funding
Mm.
situation.
And de Havilland could have survived by themselves. Let's be
A
real.
couple of them probably could have survived.
De Havilland, I'm not.
De Havilland was in the civilian aircraft industry.
yeah. The Havilland was
Yeah,
actually
they
doing
weren't,
quite.
yeah, they
Allies.
weren't doing that well.
They were surviving.
They were
That's all
like
you
the
needed.
backbone of
Team
being
Locker.
Star
No,
Wars, right?
the person I was talking to explain to that is not Team Blue.
Mm.
As I've always said, on defence matters, I do not see party politics. I work with anyone who asks my advice.
And Timu Locker, if you think we're bad with our Henrys, look at the French with Louis.
Yeah.
Louis the 14th and such, isn't it? Is that going to?
No, they got up to nearly 20, I think.
I thought they did get to 20. Let me check.
It depends, I think, on quite how you count people around the revolution. Because it's things like the son of the one who got his head chopped off might technically have survived for like a few minutes and technically been king, and unsurprisingly was called Louis, like his father and 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 his father, and then there was somebody called Henri, I think.
Well,
Just for
Dan,
Britain's throat.
Dan,
They
Dan,
they got up to Louis the 18th.
Dan, look at it this. Dan, look at it this way. It was just an olive branch by the French nobility to make the peasantry's life simpler by not changing the name of the monarch so often.
Yeah, and I mean, the French
It
don't
didn't.
count the one who was Henry VI of England, who should have succeeded Charles IV, who was the mad one who thought he was made of glass at times.
He was fun, but what I find really fun is that the French have all the way up to Louis the 18th. They're known as Louis, and then they have this guy after him comes after. It goes Charles the 10th, and then it goes a guy who calls himself, because he calls himself Louis Philippe. He's Louis Philippe the First rather than Louis the 19th.
Yeah, but they had a whole load of Philippe, and they had things like Philippe Augustus and things.
Yes,
it's a bit like
Louis
Edward the
Philippe
Confessor
Panic.
doesn't. Edward the Confessor isn't Edward the Naught, especially because he wasn't even the first Edward of the House of Wessex.
I know, he's fun.
So the one we call Edward the First was actually at least Edward the Third.
Yeah, but don't we count our lineages with stuff like that from the Norman invasion, not the Anglo-Saxon?
No, technically we count it from Edward the Confessor because that's how the Normans assisted.
Which is,
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
they didn't.
that's
But they didn't.
what
But they
I
counted
said.
him as Edward the North.
Edward the Confessor is technically 0, not Edward the First.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
because
he's
he's the
called-
one that let the Normans in.
No, his death let the Normans in because of the way the situation was arranged, and because, honestly, Harold turned out to be a very bad general.
No, he was a good general. He just
No, he was bad at logistics, and he wrecked his force marching south.
I mean, what choice did he really?
He needed to get to. He needed to secure London. Going past London is pointless.
No, it's because the territory which William was in was his old kind of feudal land, so it was the kind of personal insult thing. Yes, he probably should have taken a couple of extra days before going down, but it was the kind of challenge to his honour thing.
Yeah, but that's the thing. And that's the way when you're a
Saxon law, he could only have his men raised for 3 months of the year.
Yeah.
And he was already had them raised for over 2 months since he had to march north to fight Harold Hardrada.
Yes, but actually he's been sending people home and collecting new ones on the way south. So if he'd done that a bit more slowly, and he also had forces coming up from the west of England, and if he'd waited for them about 2-3 days, and then left London, William would have been able to do much, but Harold would have had a rested army. Which would have been far better prepared for what it's going to do. And basically, the problem his army has is it's tired. And especially, it's lacking its bowmen. And the replacement bowmen are coming from the west of England.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the trouble for him. If he'd waited for them, he'd have had the archers from the west of England, and Lord help the Normans, because if you'd had archers and you managed to get a similar position, as if Harold had managed to pick a similar position up a hill with enough decent archers, then every time the Normans on their short horses, which were the size of Shetland ponies, charged forward, they'd have probably been bushwhacked.
Yeah, as Steve Clarke, the issue with the kind of
Shetland ponies, I think.
The thing with the Anglo-Saxons and the kind of not quite hereditary thing, it was more that the House of Wessex had basically run out of people who were eligible, let alone anything else. So it was more that than democratic. It was more also
basically
that
Edward the Confessor needed to have had some kids.
Yeah.
Or at least found a way to have some kids, which was not unusual. Let's be honest, there are plenty of kings in history who have managed to basically look the other way when it's been necessary for them to look the other way in order to have some children.
Legitimization of bastards is a thing. And I use bastard in the term, in the actual term there.
No. The sort of the other way of
my wife is pregnant. Of course it's my child.
Assisting conception, because remember, you just have to. If you acknowledge the child is yours, the child is yours.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things with kind of male hereditary things is that, of course, you know who the mother is.
Yep.
On the grounds that
Yep.
She's there at the birth, whereas the father could have been absent for 9 months. And so long as they vaguely look right, so kind of you've not gone for the big strapping blonde chap when, husband is small and dark-haired, it should be okay.
Yeah, yes, as long as you go for, or rather, as long as they look like either the husband or at least the husband's father.
Yeah. In no way am I somewhat conscious of these sorts of things, because that's sort of how I ended up with a half-armed.
And also, then there's the whole joy of occasionally. They must take after the wife's family because they look really similar to the wife's family.
Yeah. So much fun.
Anyway, God Emperor Unsword. What damage could be done from torpedoes on shore installations like dry docks, gun batteries act very close to in the water, and has one ever been knocked out that way?
You see,
there's a raid on Saint-Nazaire one can think about.
Yeah, but that's a rather large torpedo.
Yes, but it was a large torpedo, but it was an efficient use of a torpedo. The fact that we're now naming a ship which is primarily going to apparently be tasked with supporting amphibious task operations for that ship worries me in many, many ways, but we'll leave that to one side.
Dr. Clarke, are you telling me that you trust the Royal Navy so little that you're concerned that they're going to take a capital asset like a modern surface combatant and use it to battering ram an enemy installation?
The trouble is, this is a Type 31, which is technically the flak frigate, which is technically of the Royal Navy's assets. They don't want to lose any of them, but the one they have specifically designed to be
more losable.
If circumstances require, expendable, is the Type 31.
I mean, I'm not saying the what's the best way of putting it? I mean, it could be worse. It could be named for a tribal that also then got an N-class named for it. And tried ramming aircraft.
Yeah, well, currently the names they've gone with for the Type 31s, and I do find this interesting because they are apparently they are named for emotions, are Venturer, Active, Formidable, Bulldog, and Campbelltown. Formidable, of course, was last an aircraft carrier which decided it was going to fight in the battle line. So possibly that's a good use of it. Active and Venturer, Bulldog, and Campbelltown.
I don't particularly like any of those.
Yeah, for frigate force, I'm not particularly sure or keen on any of them either. But yeah,
they're good names. I don't like and there's a
Bulldog is a traditional Bulldog is a traditional frigate destroyer name, so it's that sort of fine. But it's usually as a class. It's going for a class which we call them the Inspiration class, and you go, yeah. You can tell that's a class which is ordered in 2019.
Yeah,
you can tell it's the end of the 2010s. It's the end of that period, and yeah, they've ordered the Inspiration class.
Yeah, it depresses me.
Venture is supposed to be launched this year.
Oh god!
At that point, if you name the Inspiration, you should name it after a bunch of ships that the Royal Navy's had a lot of, and are very hippie. You should name them after flowers.
No, flower. In a nicest way, we already know what next flower class is going to be. They're called the Type 92 and Type 93. And the successor to them is going to be the thing which is actually the actual naval unit. And so that's going to be the Type 95, I think. And that's probably going to be called Flower Class. Those are the new uncrewed vessels that the Royal Navy's preparing to procure in large numbers.
I haven't really understood uncrewed vessels.
Yeah, they're fun.
Because how maintenance?
That's why you have a Type 26 or Type 31 nearby with a helicopter and some extra crew aboard. Would it be correct that all the stuff in SOAS for US parts cannot be refitted with non-American parts? Yes.
Depends on how much money you want to throw at the problem.
Yeah, basically that. Short-term answer, no.
Like I said earlier in stream, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing some of the European defense establishments pay very close attention to the maintenance and design specifications of some of their North American sourced gear.
This is the point. Who makes the Mark 41 VLS?
Lockheed?
No.
Yeah, it was worth a guess.
BAE. The American side of BAE makes the Mark 41 VLS.
And I'm sure there's been no data sharing between the U.S. side of BAE and the British side
By
of
the way,
BAE.
who manufactured the silver VLS cells that were put in the Type 45s for the Royal Navy?
Bay.
Yeah.
This is the thing that everyone forgets. That is actually kind of important. The whole thing with NATO sharing weapon systems and, interoperability and all that, and reliance on key partners, that has worked both ways.
It has. There is a lot of European components in American equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Just
A
ask
lot
the
of
Americans
you.
to make a good quality working jet engine.
They can. General Electric is there.
Yeah, but that's why the US Navy likes to pack a war reserve of Rolls-Royce engines. We'll leave that to one side.
Was going to say, they
The reason they have a habit of calling Rolls-Royce
they
into
do
fix.
yeah, they do seem to quite like, oh, we can't seem to do this.
Hendrik
Hey,
Beaufort,
Rolls-Royce, you available?
Hendrik Beaufort, I don't know what's happening to your questions.
But they are getting absolutely mulched by the system.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are you doing to your questions, Hendrik Beaufort? What are you doing? Timu, okay, how many ships in total did it take to sink the Bismarck? Oh, good lord.
Let me think. Prince of Wales,
That's a brutal
Hood, Prince of Wales, Hood, Suffolk, Norfolk, Ark Royal, Illustrious,
Cruise liner.
King George V.
They mean
Oh,
victorious, not illustrious.
The Swedish
Yeah.
cruiser, the Swedish cruiser / seaplane carrier Gotland to spot them in the Baltic in the first place, which means that the Royal Navy knew when they were coming out.
That and half a dozen other sources, yes.
Like,
I'm literally including any ship that even had a tangential role.
There are probably overall and I think overall there's well over 100 ships involved in the overall operations.
And if you want to be really, really loose with the definition of ships, the Catalinas are technically flying boats, so
We don't need that.
if you want to be really loose with it.
But that's not a ship, that's a flying boat.
Damn, my curse has spoiled.
But let's sort of say, a large chunk of Allied forces are mobilised for the task. Budguy8829, if World War I ends in 1916 the US doesn't get involved, how does that affect the USN?
they get even less money.
Honestly, you probably see the US continuing the policy they've been doing historically. They're not trying to build up to beat the RN, they're building a fleet that's...
Fits their needs. But the question is
Yeah.
going to be, how does World War I end in 1916? If it ends in World War in 1916 because of German victory, then the massive rearmament program of Britain, etc., is possibly going to make the Americans look at hang on, what's going on? Because the British are probably going to jump up another level in their battleships. If World War I ends because the British get a massive victory at Jutland and then bash their way into the Baltic and start imposing a blockade in the Baltic as well as the North Sea, then the German economy basically just goes kaput. Then the Americans are probably going to be trying to look at how did the British do that, so it doesn't happen to them.
There's also the third option, which is the status quo, which is if the war ends in 1916 because the Russians suddenly turn out to be... I know this is basically impossible. If the Russian army turns out to be basically completely competent and basically thrashes its way steadily into Germany through Poland...
Yeah.
At that point, you've basically ended the war navally in a status quo. There's not been a big... there hasn't been
a big
any
battle.
Game-changing actions, that have... change the way in which the US is going to think about, things going forwards.
The only scenario you get after that, though, is that it's going to change some things.
I mean, the Russians are going to continue building the fleet they were planning to build, which is actually going to put them as the rank 3.
Yeah, which might upset the Americans. And so the French are also going to continue building possibly the fleet they were going to build. No treaties is going to be an interesting scenario. Also, if it ends in 1916, the British are the only ones who have an active carrier construction program at that point. And with no wartime alliance, there's going to be no information sharing apart from on need to know. So that could cause a really interesting thing in development of naval aviation.
Yep.
The Admirals probably get completed as they were planned.
You see what? The G3s probably hit the water?
The G3s are very much a product of Jutland information, so if you don't have Jutland, who knows where things go. I doubt. I doubt. This is going to sound strange, but the information already from the various battles, Dogger Bank, etc., of operating battle cruisers means that the Royal Navy is already very much inclined against the idea of a battle space cruiser, a la what Fisher always liked to put in. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tiger is more the inspiration for ships than, let's say, Renowned, Repulse, and maybe even the Admirals, which could be an interesting one. Again, I refer you to the fact that Tiger is smaller, is shorter, thinner, and a lot heavier than Renown and Repulse. Yet sometimes people go, oh, they are both the same type of battlecruiser, and you go, they are not. They are really not. One of those could wreck the other in a fight, and it ain't the one you think it is.
All right. I will ask the the panel this. By my clock, we've been going on for about just shy of 3 hours, and we've got 3 more questions left in the tube.
I'm going to have to go sort out internet stuff and try and fix the internet, so I'm going to apologise. This isn't going to be the same normal time it normally goes to. If people don't mind, I do apologise for that.
Which to be honest,
I think it's a good idea.
Because you Brits are an hour late tonight.
Daylight savings started in the US.
Our clocks moved last night.
Oh.
So it is now 1800 my side.
It's now 1800 hours your time. Oh, so sorry. You still, it's so terrible. Ours moves in about a week or so.
Last Sunday of the month, so 3 weeks from now.
Yeah. Oh, I keep getting distracted because in the middle of my birthday.
I was going to say, it's after you've become old.
Yeah, I've completed another rotation of the sun.
Wait, Dr. Clarke's hitting 30?
I wish.
Foxo, that's cruel.
That old.
That's very
Foxo,
nice.
that is cruel. That is absolutely cruel.
I don't really know how to put this. Does this make me the oldest person in the chat?
Dan is the oldest person in the chat. Dan is the oldest person in the chat, because I'm the second oldest. And I know everyone else's ages.
I'm just shy of 30.
Then yeah, Fox was definitely the youngest.
Wait, so we've got 30? Dragon, you're what, 26?
Not quite. Not quite.
I'm 26.
Fleet's 26, Dragon's 25.
Once again, not quite, but...
Dan's in his 50s or something. And Clarke's 30.
Not quite that old.
No,
you better hope Dan remembers his Hippocratic oath. Yeah, if you ever find yourself on his
I am 30, and that's why I am 3 followed by a wrong way up infinity sign.
Rotated a certain degree.
Rotated 90 degrees along the central axis.
Yes.
I'm old enough.
You're 3 years old, okay.
Yeah.
I'm old enough that how can I put this?
You remember the Beetle?
I was having fun the other day because someone's commenting that how could someone as young as me know anything? And they said, and they were saying they were sort of this at 36 years after this many years on the earth, they knew all this stuff, and I didn't know anything because I could not be as old because I was so young. And I basically met her at I'm 2 years older than you, darling.
Age is
that argument don't work.
I was sitting in the high chair, being fed gloop basically during the Falklands War.
You are approaching your 50s then at this point.
No.
Because the Falklands was 82.
Yes.
That's at least 40 years ago. If you're in a high chair, that's only when you're around 2 to 3.
No, I was 1.
So
And if
about
everything goes to plan,
about 43.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're twice as old as me.
Yeah. God. But
You better hope Dan remembers his oath if you ever become his patient, Fox. So you
No,
are
actually-
playing with a.
here's the worst thing.
Foxo is unlikely to become my patient. I'm a geriatrician.
Dan is now
And
training
you're a
doctors.
geriatric pediatrician.
No, here's
Right, I like it,
here's
yeah.
the most fun thing for Dan. Dan, like me with the lecturing at university, Dan is now training doctors, young junior doctors, who were not alive when he first qualified as a doctor.
No, not quite.
Dan,
No.
you're older than my dad.
What?
Hey, Foxo, I'm gonna
dad's
give you
41.
a little. I'm gonna give you a little piece of advice, millennial to Zoomer. Quit while you're ahead.
Wow. Cool. No, there's a girl, and I'm going to say girl, who I work with who has just turned 20, and she's younger than my car and my coat. I do still sometimes wear.
Oh.
But no, because it's a minimum of 5 years training. I won't risk having anyone who's qualified until 2027, I think, because I qualified. My graduation day was my 23rd birthday.
Hi, Zacko. Understand, we'll stop talking. Don't worry. But, yeah.
Give me an existential crisis now. Why are all history buffs so old?
Hello.
We're not that.
Lee.
It's not that.
Lee, you're
old.
26. That's like middle-aged.
Now listen here. I
Listen here,
am not
young
20.
whippersnapper.
I am not 20. That is not middle-aged. Middle-aged is, I think the correct break-off point is, I think it's 35 to 60 that is the official bracket for middle-aged, unless I have read that wrong. As far as I'm aware, that's the official bracket.
I have never cared enough to bother to look it up. Stafford Thompson, the influence of naval traditions and doctrine on society as a whole. Oh, good lord. Traditions. Doctrine doesn't come out a lot. Traditions, though, there are lots of them. There's the whole reason why biker gangs like to tattoo various symbols on themselves to represent things. That's a whole naval tradition, because it used to be you wore your CV on your skin. And literally, you'd get a tattoo for everything you'd done, and basically you took off your shirt, and that was your CV for when you were going for when you were going for a job. Which is why sailors often, when they one of the symbols they used in some periods for advertising for work was to walk around without their shirt on in ports. Because then someone could easily look and go, oh yeah, you're that. And you do not want to put things on which were false advertising. Because if you hadn't done it and you tried to pretend it, you were in trouble.
The sea would find you out very quickly.
Yes. The sailors would find you out even quicker and chuck you into the sea. And then the sea would find out.
We must dump this man in the sea.
As well. Once you got the, I don't know, it's not directly the sail later, but you got the stuff like saying that a fishwife description.
Ooh.
Have you not heard the term? She shouted like a fishwife.
Yeah, that's because though the fisherman used to come in, drop off their catch with their wives, who would then go and hawk the catch around town while the fisherman went out to catch more fish.
Fish.
And it sort of became a catch-all for a loud and
Catch-all!
middle-aged woman.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also they'd be sitting outside gutting the fish and chatting between their little huts, was my understanding. and Seneca Nero, we generally use a threshold of at least 65 for geriatric, and for a lot of those sorts of purposes, and that's fairly international.
But
Dignity
should
soon.
Foxo ever need treatment, she will find herself mysteriously stuck into Dan's section of hospital for geriatric care.
Yeah.
Oh,
And, but the other thing I was going to say is the best or the most well-known classification system is Canadian for that. Just for what it's worth, so it's the name for a guy called Rockwood, but it's the Canadian Health and Social something scale, CHSA, I think.
I actually have some examples offhand I can name to answer the next question. So if I may,
Birmingham boy, yes, I'll read out the question. Are there any good works of fiction about theorized naval or planet-based military, more broadly development or exoplanets with different physical conditions?
So, this can vary, and I know of a few. So the first one that I know of is a world in which everything else is mostly similar, but it's primarily a land-based world. There are oceans, but they're more what we would know as inland seas in terms of how they are, in terms of depth and functionality. It's also a world with no rubber. So there's oil, but there's no rubber. So basically, it leads to a radically different technological development. And also, you have certain things like religious organizations dictating what technology is officially allowed and what isn't. You've also got worlds in which I know, for example, I read of a Isaac Asimov novel where Jupiter was inhabited by a species that was intelligent, but the way they had developed technologically was so radically different. So, for example, they had poison gas bombs that were oxygen, because to them that was poisonous. And they had entirely different setups for forging iron and steel. They would literally sift collect the molecules of iron, and then they'd have basically sealed off plants where they would develop it. And they were so used to working at high pressure that the concept of a vessel that could function in the vacuum of space or outside their own planet's deep atmosphere was so foreign to them that they just couldn't get off world, basically.
I thought that one series was where they ended up a race ended up bombing Earth with oxygen bombs, and then wondered why it didn't have any impact.
No, it was this thing I'm thinking of. It was a single it was a single short story. This one.
Yeah, there was a series though where the aliens race did all this fighting to try and get to Earth, got to Earth and launched their bombs, and the bombs were oxygen bombs.
Wow.
And they hadn't worked out that the people they were fighting breathed oxygen. So
yeah, thanks very much for the free oxygen.
It didn't do it. They were expecting it to kill the whole planet, and basically, as they were being deluged by Earth ships, they realized that the Earth ships didn't have a toxic atmosphere to prevent them boarding it. That was the atmosphere that the humans actually breathed.
Mm.
And
I remember reading a similar one about water and salt water specifically.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Because salt water is incredibly corrosive and toxic to many things.
That reminds me of one I can't remember what it's called now, but one I've actually read online, which is a history set on a world where there is no salt water. Everything is fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a bit weird because we are basically a little sack of salt water.
Yeah.
Listen, Dan, I know I can get quite salty, especially about certain modern events, but you don't need to call me out that bad.
This man,
because if I remember correctly, doesn't corrosion work differently if you don't have salt water at sea?
It's less of a concern, but there are plenty of things that like to dissolve in water that are just as corrosive or worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In answer to Colin Cameron's question, how long do you think James Stanhope would have lasted as First Lord if Churchill did not take over? Probably until about May the 4th, 1940, when Chamberlain falls from power. But the interesting thing, if Stanhope had stayed in power, it's doubtful that there'd have been a pause in the carrier construction. Because he was not he was happily carrying on with everything and not pausing anything. And of course, he, let's be honest, back in World War One, he had been a sort of 34-year-old. I'm not sure what he did in World War One. Actually, he did do something. Yeah. He'd first served in the Admiralty in 1924. He knew the Admiralty very well. He was an experienced Admiralty officer and honestly should probably been left there because he'd done all the service through the 1920s and 30s, was up to date with systems, had worked with everyone. Yeah, but no. Someone had a bright idea. But as I've said before, there aren't many other options. Anyway. Is that last question? That is last question. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Sorry it was a bit weird at the beginning, and sorry it's had issues. I will go and sort out and fix those issues, so they will stop having issues. That is the plan, to stop there being issues, and to make it work. And
are you going to be playing 4-5 with you?
I am going to go and have a long conversation with the network cables and do some testing of the various systems and find out what's going on.
Knight,
I take it there aren't going to be any biscuits.
Knight, I have been paying attention to chat. I just haven't seen anything that I needed to respond to.
Yeah.
Also, you've been spelling my name wrong the entire time.
Yeah, so honestly, I would just find that a little bit funny.
Which, yeah, is made all the more funny by the fact that my name is up on your screen.
I won't, but nicest way, Steve, I'm not going to try and put 186 back together. I'm just going to leave it as it is, to split it apart, different sections, and just hope people find it. And if they don't, they don't. It's annoying, but it will be fixed. More importantly, the videos have already been uploaded for Friday and Saturday this week. The videos for Tuesday and Wednesday will be uploaded. Will be uploaded probably Monday, maybe Tuesday, for the Wednesday one. And hopefully by the time of Thursday live, well, there's a BT engineer supposed to be coming here on Wednesday, and there's other people coming here during this week to try and fix things. So hopefully everything will be sorted out shortly.
We can but hope.
I would say, Dr. Clarke, if I cannot uninstall my foreman, you cannot uninstall the BT engineer?
It's not the BT engineer's fault. The fact that they send out rank amateurs to me is not their fault. Hopefully by now they've learnt and they send out someone who's actually a senior engineer. Last time they had learnt and they sent out someone who'd been an engineer with BT for 25 years and knew what he was talking about. So he and I had a fine conversation. He sort of fixed the problem.
Paul, just to answer your question/statement in my chat, I have the stupidity of youth, and I know I will pay for it later. But yes, I am being quite stupid. But yes, it is acrylics. Paul was asking if I was wearing a respirator.
That is good.
Good.
Usually I just open a window, but yeah, and a respirator is sensible.
I never said I was.
And does it have in-date filters?
Dan, I'm being an idiot. I'm not wearing a respirator.
Oh.
I'm just aware that I'm being an idiot.
Yeah.
Go and put a respirator on.
At least open a window.
I have good ventilation in here. So
usually I do paint, and when I do painting, I do it outside.
Unless you're doing it in a negative pressure kind of tank. Grumble, grumble.
I have no place to vent it to at my desk. That's the problem.
Then
Okay, you get
I'm not
you
taking
get
my-
one of those large air conditioning tubes. You attach to the front a computer fan to make it on suction mode to suck air, and you stick that on your desk, and you put the tube out a window.
I have a paint booth. I use it for the primer, which is a solvent base. Yes,
Char-
but Megascrow, Drac was also heating up the polymer and melting right over top of it.
Drac was
Yeah,
doing. Drac does many things which we worry about.
Yes,
I also-
Drac has interesting phone calls from people with some of the when he gets the clever idea to order these things.
Drac sometimes has interesting phone calls when he's taken these things.
Yeah.
Speaking as the sort of person who sometimes receives them and goes, "Hello, Drac NFL." He goes, "Hello," and I go, "What have you drunk this time?"
It was when he was talking about his order for the stuff for stripping paint off his minis.
And he's ordered enough quantities that he could actually make some high explosives. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. Drac, just use simple green. It works fine.
No.
No. It works fine. When you're ordering 10 litres of it and 10 litres of each of two other things.
In the industrial strength, not the over-the-counter nail polish remover strength.
Yeah.
Simple green is a plant-based solvent.
It can also be used to make explosives.
10 litres of it.
Many things can be used to make explosives.
Yes,
That's
when you're
why
ordering
explosives
30
is a
litres.
problem.
Yes, the trouble is, it's when you're ordering these litres and you also, on the same card, have probably ordered all sorts of other interesting things for your various DIY projects.
You gotta remember, it's not about can it be used to make explosives, it's how easy is it to make explosives with it.
And it's when you pop up on a certain number of lists having made enough of these orders, you get interesting phone calls.
Rumsfeld, just be glad that I know that you're just trying to annoy me.
Oh.
No, Stafford, the best smelling glue is PVC primer and solvent.
Do you know the easy explosive to get your hands on them?
No,
Okay.
no,
No.
Listen,
As the host of Ramblings, and she is the moderator of this server. No.
I
No.
am more than willing to play fast and loose with TOS on an occasion. Things that could be used to actively harm other people is not that occasion.
Look.
No, Seneca, my name, the only part of my name that has an I in it is my last.
Look, speaking as probably the only person who's had to have a conversation with policemen about books I've been procuring.
Zacko, Drac is trying to blow up Surrey, from what we can tell.
I thought he was just trying to burn it down.
Yeah. Burn down, then blow up, or blow up, then burn down. I haven't worked out the order between it.
Missiles were longer range and self-correcting. So that's the advantage of them versus guns. It's range. It's quite literally it's always range. It's why does the missile age get rid of the battleship? Because it's the missile age, not the aircraft age, which gets rid of the battleship. It's literally the range. Missiles offer you a longer range.
No. It's not even that. It's not even that. It's basically the reason the battleship dies is because you just can't armor anything anymore. You cannot armor a ship to resist missiles.
You but we'll leave that to one side.
No, you fundamentally can't. If something like Harpoon can penetrate with the right warhead the turret front of Yamato, imagine what a shipwreck could do with a similar warhead.
But you're not. It's not but the defensiveness isn't what makes it a capital ship.
Well, no, I said battleship, not capital ship.
Also,
yeah,
the capital ship isn't obsolete. The battleship is.
You're forgetting. Yes, the harpoon can do it with a very specialist warhead. But every harpoon that's carrying that very specialist warhead is one that's not carrying a general purpose warhead. They're
The
more
thing-
effective against softer
And
targets.
I would
Yeah,
also
the thing-
say that, before we jump into this fleet, the answer to that question is always you put the armor in the right places, and you also include subdivision. Battleships were always more than just about the armor, it was also the subdivision. Too many people get so obsessed with the armor plate and being able to bash through that, but it's also the subdivision.
I mean, I'm not
And
denying that, but
to an
there's a-
extent, the answer to the missile problem is actually increased subdivision and internalizing the armoring, not relying on a belt armor or anything like that, but having armor internal. Because in
completely.
the nicest way, it doesn't matter necessarily how good your missile is. If you've got to go through 3 decks and then plow into armor, the odds are to get to the engineering spaces and cause damage to a ship. The odds are you're not getting to those engineering spaces.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we see this all across the thing. The point with missiles is rule 1: don't get hit, either active defense, so interceptor missiles or CIWS. Point 2: if you get hit, try and take the hit on the superstructure in a way that doesn't impugn your ability to either fight or sail. Point 3: if your ability to fight or sail is impeded, don't take damage that means you can't sail at all. Point 4: if you do, at least remain afloat so that you can be towed. Point 5: if all else fails, make sure you're able to abandon the ship easily.
Zacho, the problem is it is far, far, far easier to swap the warhead on a missile than it is to alter the armor scheme on a.
And also, the thing is, the thing you've also got to bear in mind is that the reason that we don't see armored ships in the traditional sense is because weapons that can defeat them would be very easy to create or retrofit. That's the thing. You might have a period where a armored warship might have a relatively good survivability against ski-skimming missiles, but that lasts until the powers that be, make a warhead that can defeat that armor. And at the point, that's it. It's done. And that won't be a long period at all. This is the thing. It's the potential. It's the potential of the missile to defeat armor quickly, in terms of in the aftermath of a conflict breaking out or an armored warship entering service, that renders traditional armor obsolete.
There is certainly an argument that is put forward.
Literally.
That is certainly an argument that's put forward.
It would be a case of, okay, cool, you've got this warhead and this missile that can defeat this armor. That's all well and good, but you have to have it on the right place and the right ships, and that's an opportunity cost against other targets.
I mean, at that point, you just carry. It's like at that point, it goes back to basically weapon composition, just like it was with the gun era. You have a certain number of armor-piercing missiles, and then your general purpose missile stocks. That's not really a.
I think what we're more likely to see, and there is certainly a goodly amount of discussion in this in future of armoring and ships, etc., because it's stuff which was actually going around in the 1960s and was actually being looked at. Once you start thinking about wars lasting for more than a couple of weeks, and you start or less, there was the whole idea that in a Cold War, if it went hot, would go nuclear within 45 minutes or something like that, at various points in its days. Once you start thinking about a longer-term conflict, suddenly the idea of armoring your ships to better improve their survivability in some ways does start to filter back in. And that was part of the scenario why they weren't armoured. Now, I don't mean this sort of armouring and necessarily having a belt arrangement, although you might well have a thicker steel around the hull and belt at sea level to deal with sea skimming impacts. But the thing is, what you're to be talking about is, let's say, you might put 4 inches of thick armour over the engines. Over the engine room spaces and those sort of things. And that's the thing which was starting to look at again. And I think the thing is,
it wouldn't surprise me if that comes back.
If you add in rail guns, which are increasingly becoming something which people are looking at, very, very soon you end up with something which doesn't look too dissimilar to a battleship or maybe a cruiser, at least a traditional gun cruiser,
yeah.
in form. What they end up calling it is going to be an interesting thing. In the Daily Mail, they'll all be called battleships or warships, battleships, no matter what they are, because they currently refer to the River class OPVs as battleships. So I'm sorry, Fleet, but they're probably.
No, I agree with that.
If they're called, I'm not sure if they're going to be called cruisers because that's got the Imperial distinction. And for some reason, and this was a discussion I actually had the other day with someone. Oh yeah, well, battleship test is less threatening to us than cruiser.
Because I mean,
so don't explain me that. Don't explain that one to me, Fleet, because I have no idea why. According to polling and testing, battleship test less threatening than cruiser. Cruiser is the Imperial past. So they could end up called a battleship because that's considered better in word phrasing than cruiser.
Well, think about it.
As the resident panel youngster, I can answer that for you, Clarke.
Yes.
Well, I also have my own opinion.
And it's very simple. Battleships are cool. Cruisers are not.
And also,
battleships bring the mental image of the Iowa and honorable combat and big guns and coolness. A cruiser doesn't. A cruiser brings up imperialism.
And for those who are slightly more familiar. And for those who are slightly more familiar and know what a modern cruiser is, for the vessels that have that designation in various fleets, those are terror. Well, no, Can I? Those are actually the very, very sharp end of surface naval power. Things like the Kirovs, the Slavas, the Ticonderogas. Those are actually fairly terrifying to deal with. A battleship.
Looking at it from a historian.
That's what I said. That's what I said, Foxo. That's literally what I said.
What you said, Fleet, was those who know a little bit more.
Yeah, that's what I said.
You've got to remember that
they might not
people care what sounds cool.
Well, that's what I said. I said those who know a little bit more. That was my whole premise. Was those who understand a little bit more about the way navies work. It's not. There might not be a history buff, but they might know. Oh, that's a Ticonderoga missile cruiser. That's a Kirov missile cruiser. It's not the same as a standard Arleigh Burke or Admiral Gorshkov class frigate. That's what I meant. That's the market.
I'm afraid at that point, actually, you probably do need someone who's actually looked into things a fair bit.
Yeah, because I'm going to be real with you. I like my naval history, but modern stuff and Cold War stuff beyond the 50s gets very boring very quickly.
I would disagree with that, but that's down to opinion more than anything else.
For most people,
in the nicest way, Fleet, you just wrote up the Red Fleet timeline.
Yes.
You are not an unbiased opinion on this one.
You kind of focus on it.
Like a lot of people I've at least talked to, so I'm not going to say everyone because it's definitely not. It's just people who I've talked to. They go up to about 1960s, and after that, then they just lose interest in naval stuff.
Well, to be honest,
because it's not all classified, and also
it's the same issue air combat has.
Yes,
it's that battleships shooting gun at other battleship. That's simple, and that makes sense. It's something people can easily visualize. All this, as soon as you get into like the 70s and the 80s, and you get stuff like Aegis, phalanx, missiles.
Well, Aegis and
it becomes a step up in visualization.
Yes.
And sort of, which causes people eyes to glaze over.
I disagree. I do like the way that Aegis can.
Just a quick question. Bud Guy 8829, yes, the Kirov class did have some arming, and so does the Arleigh Burke. And again, Kevlar over certain portions of the hull, CIC engineering, armoring, everything. Those are things which have carried on.
And I will also point out that
on pretty much every ship.
I will also point out Dr. Clarke is also quite right in another factor that pretty much all ships are splinter-proofed at the waterline. Basically, because for the possibility that A, near misses exist, and B, if you shoot down that very bad, dangerous missile close to your ship, you have to stop the splinters now.
Yeah.
I would like to draw attention of everyone to HMS Porcupine, which was previously Penelope, or Pepperpot was Penelope, wasn't it? After they got a little bit.
They had many near misses.
Many near misses, and looked like a colander. And then once they got all the wooden bits stuck out, looked a bit like a porcupine. Hey,
look, those wooden bits were keeping the water out.
Oh,
it's fun.
I am not knocking it. I
No.
still have hopes that we're going to get to go and play in the Royal Navy damage control experience thing.
Yeah.
With Drax.
We will try and sort that out. That'll be fun.
Mainly because it will be
All those
mildly
in
hilarious.
all those in favour of taking Fleet, but making him wear a T-shirt which says "I think the Hosh is better than the Royal Navy's ships."
Well, that would be fun. First of all, that would be fundamentally untrue. My opinions have been made perfectly clear. In fact, during this Bruships.
Yes.
Secondly,
This is
I
Nah,
just think it'd be
okay.
fun.
no,
Okay, no.
I do not
Mark,
think this would be fun.
let's be fair with it. Let's dress him in a shirt that says, "Please be patient. I'm a Francophile."
That's not exactly fair either. I'm not a Francophile. I'm more of a.
Be
I'm
nice
more-
to me. No, just this one that says, "Be
But-
nice to me. I like the Hosh."
No offense, Fleet,
With a
but
picture
you
of
have
Hosh.
admitted,
Lead, you
on
are
live
a
stream.
Francophile.
you have admitted multiple times on live stream that you are a Francophile.
Yes.
Yes, I heard your tone of voice when you talk about French aircraft.
I think that
When
Shivera,
have I
I think,
referred to French aircraft?
oh Shivera, I think that counts as a murder by proxy. It's not murder
Yeah,
if no
maybe.
one actively does it. It's an accident.
It could be criminally negligent
Remind me-
homicide, though.
Is
Oh.
does it make one a
Steve-
Francophile if you just like people like Eva Green?
Steve Clarke has a good point. You get a T-shirt with Sol's Hosh on it.
Yes.
Oh yes.
Well,
Yeah.
well, Soul's Hosh is a pretty good piece of artwork. Can't deny.
Yeah.
Yes, but you should be wearing it.
Yeah, nah, I'm all right.
That's what you think.
Oh.
Look, as long as I get
Probably
the
with,
Ralph
you know,
artwork, I commission,
basically,
I don't really care.
I think you'd have Soul's Hosh, and you probably would want to have My Dream, and then just the words My Dream over it for Fleet to wear.
No. It's just
Ayomidi
Steve
Bissari's
Larry
got a quite
Puppy.
nice question.
Hmm.
Sorry, just actually vaguely looking back at the chat. And isn't somebody I know too well
Yeah.
as a contributor and things. So, is it possible for anti-submarine rockets and missiles to be retrofitted to serve a dual purpose as anti-submarine and anti-ship weapons, or am I playing modern warships a tad too much? No, they
They often do
fancy.
have a second. They often do have second line roles, and most
Yeah.
surface-to-air missiles also have a second line anti-surface role. Believe it or not, you can use Standard missiles to knock ships out.
Yeah,
It's not a nice way to go for the ships because the Standard missile does that, and then the Standard missile tends to go up and come down fast on them.
and probably still has quite a lot of fuel on board, which is not nice. And things.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably not Charles Maurer, because the holes you usually tear in ships are far larger than the holes you tear in aircraft fuel tanks.
Yeah.
Like several orders of magnitude.
Basically, the thing you have in ships is you have subdivided up fuel tanks. So basically, yeah, you lose a fuel tank, you don't lose all your fuel.
Yeah. Also, I mean, that's when we talk about the holes in ships, we're normally talking in feet or meters, not millimeter caliber or fraction of inch caliber holes,
No.
which you were in the kind of self-sealing tanks on World War II aircraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing that an aircraft from that time period is going to be hit that it would be expected / hope to survive would be a 20 Mike.
Yeah.
And anything bigger than that, a 40 millimeter or, God forbid, an 80 or 88 millimeter, no one's expecting that aircraft to come home. Maybe a strategic bomber, but even then, it'd be a near miss situation.
There was that. There was a particular. I think it was a B-17, which basically was escorted part of the way home by a German fighter because it was just so shot up. And there are a few Lancasters which got home in World War II, which were.
Yeah.
Actually,
Oh
one
my!
thing the praise of in that regard is actually the Wellington managed to
Yeah.
survived
Okay.
pretty well with 88s being shot at it. 'cause
And
it was geodetic construction.
there's also
Yeah.
a fairy swordfish, but they were literally flying string bags anyway. So if they just become more like a string bag, it just doesn't make much difference. You can't really say it's a great thing when it's it's just what they already were in the first place.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I read a
not like
lecture at Oxford about this, and it was with strategic bombers. Punching a hole in them doesn't really matter unless you hit the pilot or the engines.
Mm-hmm.
Or the
Because
payload.
aircraft like the Lancaster could fly with some like 30% of their surface area wing missing without load.
Yeah.
But as soon as you took out an engine, they needed most of that wing back.
Knight, arguably speaking, I try UK food multiple times a week because I'm drinking Iron Brew. Two, drop the second U. Charles Maurer, I was thinking more splinters. Even the splinters are sometimes multiple feet long. They're cubic.
Yeah.
They can be conveniently measured in cubic feet.
When we talk about ships, we're talking usually about spalling, and spalling is large chunks of molten metal breaking off from the from one side of a from one side of a metal of a sort of usually a one of the what are they called? One of the watertight bulkheads, etc., or something like that, in the hull. Inside and smashing through the compartment because there's been an explosion on the other side. And those are usually fist-sized lumps of metal flying through. They will literally punch large holes in any humans they come in contact with, and will sometimes punch large holes in metal. It'll be fist-sized. It will not be small.
This is why you want the eternal armor around things that could go bang.
Yes. This is what basically the internal armor is not necessarily is not about dealing with the missile. The missile will be dealt with. The missile impact will be dealt with by the compartmentalization. The internal armor is about preventing whatever the missile does reaching the stuff you want to be protective of. Which is why they have Kevlar and various things around things like the CIC, around engineering, around those spaces.
Yeah, and
context.
to back up Stafford's point, those Great Lakes / New York mosquitoes, they're built different. Those
I wonder.
those little buggers are built different, and they're bugs. They're built different.
I wonder if it's not the mythical being that Drac once told me of through a meme. El Musco.
Okay, right then. On that bombshell, thank you very much, everyone, for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you found it interesting. And yeah, we're going to say good night now. Thank you to my panel for putting up with all the IT issues. Thank you to Runon for covering for a bit on Twitch. And thank you, everyone, for doing all this stuff. And I hope you enjoyed. I hope Runon's group have enjoyed on the other end of Twitch, if they've been listening to us as well. And take care, everyone.
Just been a litany of complaints, Dr. Clarke, one after the other, after the other.
It's just,
dear.
it's just non-stop. It's non-stop. All right.
All
right. Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Foxo. Thank you, Dragon. Thank you, Runon, for doing all the other lovely admin work. And thank you, Fleet. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the new reformed Fleet on Ramblings tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, running a much tighter ship tomorrow. Oh yes.
Be a very tight ship. Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
We'll look forward to it.
Good luck with that.
You get everything done in a tight 45, right?
Believe it when I see it.
It's part of the whole. It's part of the whole new, more strict communications office on the dry dock. Part of the whole new thing I'm doing.
Very good. All right. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, and good
Bye.
night.
I'm about to get fired.
Twitch, I'm going to raid us out